I guess we're ready.
Hello, everyone. I'm here with my puppies. They're excited because they came in from outside from the storm that's coming in. I want to thank everyone for joining us for our day 4 and final day of our 16th annual Rio Grande Valley International Poetry Festival. It's been an amazing, amazing festival after a couple, 2, 3 years of hybrid only and COVID-stricken festival that we were able to do a lot of in-person events. We went back to our college and university readings and our slam competition and our poetry pachanga with dinner. It was amazing. And so you can find the hashtag VIPF23 to see the highlights, or go to Rio Grande Valley International Poetry Festival's group page on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Today we are excited about our first reading from Mouthfeel Press poets. Mouthfeel Press poets write the body. Mouthfeel Press poets share writing that explores the physicality of the body and wrestles with the tension created when we seek out the body's mysteries, take the body and its responses for granted, or when the body's fragility manifests in unexpected ways. So I want to first say thank you to everyone that's here, everyone that's watching. I want to welcome Mouthfeel Press. We're great friends and excited about all the poetry and other literature that is coming forth from you, Maria. It's so exciting, and I'm excited to share space with all of you, and we can't wait to listen to what you have for us. So our panel members today are Miranda Maloney. She's going to be the moderator, and she's the author of Cracked Spaces, along with other works, and she is also the publisher of Mouthfeel Press. I hand it over to you, and welcome to the Valley International Poetry Festival.
Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. We're very happy to be here, and we want to thank you for allowing us this space. We want to thank all the participants and the audience of the Rio Grande Valley International Poetry Festival that make this event possible. We're very happy to be here, and just some information. Our panel of poets are going to be reading poetry. They may be discussing a little bit of their context. And then at the end, if we do have time, we will go ahead and have a Q&A. And the audience out there is welcome to, to type in their questions. Edward, will you be able to see those questions for us? Okay, wonderful. And so we hope that you enjoy the event. This is a very profound panel of poets, and we are constantly writing about the body, about the process of writing, and we talk about this process, and we would like to share that with you this afternoon. So I will go ahead and get started with our first reader, and that is Leslie Contreras Schwartz. She is the 2021 Academy of American Poets Laureate Fellow, the 2019 to 2021 Houston Poet Laureate, and the author of 5 collections of poetry, including The Body Cosmos, which will be published in the spring of 2024. Leslie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, Edward. I'm very grateful to be here among these beautiful poets. And today I'll be reading a new poem and a piece from the Body Cosmos. So I'll just start. Deep winter. Day. It's 100 degrees, Houston heat and bayou thick. But when I take a step, I see a frozen field. I am a black mare, and under my body's weight, each offering of grass breaks from my black hooves. I dance across the icy spindles that crunch, goldenrod trapped in ice. When I pause to muzzle and slip up with my tongue, deliciously cold, the air still and caught in the magnolia trees, Spanish moss frozen into white beehives, the bayou crystallized to hold back its flood. I put my head to the sweet air-conditioned bliss from the car's dash. I dance across this homeland with my own heavy breath as welcome company, and my lungs expand with the frigid air. My home is winter, inside, under the weight of black hooves. But the future is wildfire smoke, and I want to undream an ocean of land that burns and tears, brutal, terrible lights, wildfires that bring the summer. I want a winter that swallows and buries this possibility. Here, every leaf bears hoarfrost, clothed in a mother's clasp of ice. Summer shadow frostbit, and every budding head frozen shut. Now, budding headlights, and my foals bleat against my legs. Night. I leave my place while the sky blackens, heat suffocating the spreading oats with its brutal wet breath. Its mouth over mine, I let myself walk to its center. I hope my lungs crackle and wake in the air. Am I strong enough? At night, the earth cooling from its day fire, my body awakens to the earth again. Confined all day inside from the heat, now every step turns foot to hoof to paw. I'm wild for oxygen, wolf-haired, pacing the asphalt, damn near howling, as the cicadas throw and cackle and stutter. Surrounded with and consumed by life, every mosquito sting against bare leg, the heron silhouette in the mud-colored bayou, the hawk standing at its post at the street light. A homeland, the rimmed air, the warm beating of my heart and lungs beneath the breast that seems quiet and firm. How many winters do I have left? How many winters live inside me still? A bounty of silence, a silver ice-rimmed night cover. I imagine this place of quiet, a balm steadied in my mind. So I write about illness and disability and living with illness. And I did contract COVID during the pandemic and was sick for a long time. So this next poem is about that experience. I write often about the subconscious and the imaginary, the imagined space of experience, trying to connect with my readers through that way. So this next poem is imagining this journey through contracting illness and surviving. It's called Xibalba, which is the underworld of the Mayan Popol Vuh. Xibalba. The lights in the bedroom flicker. I lay in our bed listening as somewhere an animal is beating its tired head. For weeks in my sick bed, I cannot sit up without my lungs feeling crushed. I can barely breathe. Whatever beast wrestles, it marks time against my skull. In a half dream, I walk to the door and shout, "Who's doing that?" and nothing but this violent drum, its ancient beating, blow after blow drowning my words. The thought of speaking rolls over my body with its 10,000-ton wheels. I roll over with eyes in slits, lucid enough to see my 5-year-old boy jumping on the bed, aching the springs with his bare feet. We are alone here with the framer and the shaper, the Maya sacred one, the feathered serpent curling on the ceiling with its open jaw. My son laughs as the god crackles luminous slivers through hell's river on the walls, clicking its broken teeth together straight into my lungs. The roof flies off and my boy and I lay beneath the open womb of the sky. He crawls near me, wraps his limbs around mine underneath the coat of blankets, its tassels of stars. Mama, I hope you feel better soon. At the lit of Chibalba, the underworld of death gods, a sliver of light breaks from the bedroom door. I see my baby leave and don't want to close my eyes. This is a long poem, so I'll skip a little bit forward. I imagine myself going into the underworld and taking the journey. I'd reached the crossroads of 4 paths leading into the heart of Chibalba, where the heroes were undone. Yesterday or a millennia ago, when my people who'd faced death with story and plunged into the world's gouged out mouth, pulled from underneath by vines, shimmering in phosphorescent ultramarine, verdant green. There, next to galvanized steel pipes in the bayou, black water spitting against the muddy banks, forcing our families into the attics, the roofs. There, with feathers of quetzal and cotinga winding its neck around our ankles, our throats. I view my family on the bank from under the water, caught in its terrible jaw. I look up, cast in that blue brilliance that glimmers through the gaps, the faces of my children, my husband, and there it is, the sound, the beating, the drum. Chibalba fills our bedroom. Who dares to have a body in this place? My husband wakes me, feeds me soup, water from a straw. I suck medicine through a tube powered by a noisy black machine. The box sits like a tank between my legs. It has been weeks since I left either the bed or the couch, laying, blinking, and when awake, staring through the window at a wall at one of the children's faces. Breath came as if through a tiny sieve, gulped in small pockets. You're here, the doctor said on the phone. Be grateful. The air rations itself as I sit outside wrapped in a blanket, feeling shorn. I hear the ball court in its echoing chambers. My children play in the front yard while the light flickers through the leaves of the oak tree on the yellowing lawn. Underneath the world, or beside it, along it, between it, there, the pulsing of Kuntinga, indigo, gleaming, glowing its unearthly blue, its color not of ocean blue, not a sky flanking the earth, only death lapis lazuli of the sacred, a deep cave at its center with a rattling tail. In its hue, the blood of childbirth, the whitened lips of the dead, the infant's violet wail. I hear its pulse and ring, long and unraveling, a cruel silence with a terrifying bell inside. I had already heard the bell. I had already imagined my children without me. I rest my head back on the chair and stare at the sky that is no longer the sky. Now my son's kid sneakers of black and red and white, flashing lights when he jumps. My 8-year-old's plastic glittering pink sandals, both dangling off the edge of a spider swing, their small hands flayed out and waving. Their laughter, her sigh, to the canyon below. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. So our next reader is Elisa A. Garza. Elisa's chapbook, Between the Light, Entre, la claridad, is out from Mouthfeel Press, and it is in its second edition. Her current writing project focuses on recharting the body during illness. Thank you, Elisa, for being here with us.
Thank you, Maria, for that lovely introduction. And thank you, Leslie, for getting us started today. I am really happy to be here. And I'm going to read several poems for you from that are, I'm working on a new manuscript. I write about the body recently, most recently, from the perspective of illness. And it gives me a lot to write about. And what I've been working on is playing with form a lot. In some cases, creating my own forms, but what I'm going to read from you today they are all sonnets. I've been working on sonnets for several months now, and these are blank verse sonnets, so they don't rhyme. And also, they don't always have 5 metrical feet. Sometimes they have 3 or 4, or a mixture of all of these things. And the way that I play with the form, aside from removing the rhyme and changing the meter, is that I will often also put the turn in different places, or make the stanzas longer or shorter than they traditionally are. So I'm going to start with the first sonnet that I wrote, which is titled "The Body Betrays." One cell starts humming off key, just enough, then others join. Soon a chorus of vibrations, a fresh voice, and the body listens. Oh, so subtly the new choir, their debut song, persuades. Singing softly, they settle and they grow in number, in harmony. They belong. Emboldened, cells roam, move beyond the cluster in their concert hall, teaching others new sounds, colonizing, spreading song into lymph, creating a vascular tune, unchallenged. This, you see, is how. So I have another sonnet that's like on a similar way of approaching this writing about illness and the body, which is these two are similar in that they both focus on a central metaphor or image that is meant to bring the reader in or help the reader identify, regardless of whether the reader is experiencing illness or not. And this one is titled "Relationship Status Complicated." Medicine, a stormy lover, seduces me. I shiver as chemo caresses my veins. My bones go hollow. The marrow, too faint, revives overly blushed. We meet this way for many months before my lover removes a tumor of harsh indecision. Yet we proceed slowly. When I am ready for more, my skin flames under searing gaze. Every day, I peel away, remade. No longer passive, I consume my lover, soak it into every cell. I become the despised, my love the storm. And this next one, it's a curtail sonnet, which is a shortened form, 10.5 lines. And here I was seeking to really focus on language and manipulating language as the central idea of what's happening in this poem. It's titled "Electron Radiation," which is a particular kind of radiation that they give you when your cancer moves from where it began into the skin and the lymph channels, because this radiation focuses on the skin rather than traditional proton radiation, which passes through the skin and into the flesh of the body. So I think I already told you the title. It's electron radiation. Here we go. Skin of my body, hosting enemy mine, layers of cells the beams touch first. Raise feather back and forth, ensuring full burn. Skin of mine, surgical scar of my body, proof of betrayal, enemy so near. Burnish, braise the concealed, let flame evict the unseen. Then renew, flesh, you fragile cover, dearest skin, be enemy no more. Come clean, reform, be true. Then I have several poems more for you, where what I started to do to think about new ways to write about the body and illness is I started to merge what was happening to me in my body with what was happening outside in the natural world. And so I have several different approaches to share with you. This one is titled, I Am the Shores. My skin, sand under golden sun, holes for tiny crabs at rest as the waves cycle over. My blood pushing both air and pollutants into pores, seeking equilibrium. Gulls peck the dead cold eyes of fish caught in seaweed nets. Jagged rocks scar the view as waves burst into droplets. Minute slaps of pain dulled by repetition. The gulls cry and hover, search the margins. Gull's eye view, the shores of my chest in darkened hues that sharpen on close glide. A brown flaky coastline am I. The shallows, marsh seeping to sea. This one is titled Radiation Bestiary. Spring arrives early in hot blaze, to tree eyes smarted by gusty winds. Brave blooms are colorful tears bruising underfoot. Skinny limbs trill, sing themselves green. Songbirds sprout leaves. The maple bleeds abundant, wings that never fly. I too overheat. My chest absorbed the daily rays and now sheds old bark in flakes, crusts and eager yellow sap. Home to burrowing insects, I endure gores of woodpecker staccato, scrape of hawk talons. I am raw. What good can come of so much? My last poem is titled Easy. It has an epigraph from Ada Limon's poem In the Shadow, as if it was easy for the world to make flowers. Dependable like sunlight, color bursts onto every berm and field, seemingly effortless, a new season appearing overnight, as if flowers make the world, such making easy as opening a bloom, easy as breath, a sigh in the dark. If only each of us could exhale flowers, see the beauty we birth as we breathe, the blossoms teeming with potential, with connection, a belonging, easy as color belongs to flowers, easy as hope, budding in a field. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. Thank you for sharing your poetry. We appreciate it. Our next reader is Katherine Hoerth. And Katherine is an assistant professor of English at Lamar University and the author of 5 poetry books, including her recent ecofeminist collection, Flare Stacks in Full Bloom, from the Texas Review Press. And that was out in 2022. Katie, I know you as Katie. Thank you for being here with us today.
Great, thank you so much, Maria, for gathering us together. And thank you both, Leslie and Elisa, for sharing your really beautiful and powerful words with us this afternoon. It was such inspiring work, and I can only hope to follow in y'all's footsteps. And so, yes, I write a lot of ecofeminist poetry, and ecofeminist poetry, just really quickly, kind of challenges the binary between the wilderness and civilization in a similar way to the way feminists challenge the binaries between the masculine and the feminine. And so how does that relate to poetry of the body? Well, lately I've been writing poetry about my experiences with my body. For the past few years, I've been struggling with infertility. And so these poems kind of speak to that experience, but because I'm an ecofeminist writer, nature and the natural world just comes into my poems because that's just a way that I kind of make sense and understand the things that are happening in my life. So I'll just go ahead and start with some of these poems here. And also I'm gonna say these are all brand new poems. So they might be a little bit rough. They're unpublished and brand new and part of a messy project that I'm working on. So the first poem is called Results. And just, I guess, a quick little intro. This is about when I was receiving some, not so great results on a fertility procedure. So, results. To pass the time, you watch the eagle can. A bonded pair have nested in a pine, mated, laid 2 eggs, and now they're waiting, like you wait, for news, for any sign, some movement in the shell, a hairline crack, a call from embryology. You sit by your phone like she sits on the eggs and wait, and wait, and wait. It's days and days that feel like seasons passing through your flesh. You have 5 embryos, a clutch you want to hold within your palms like precious gems, to warm them with your love so they might grow. And soon you'll find out if these microscopic seeds of human beings have human beings in them after all. But you, the eagles, and their love are powerless to nature, God, and fate, their awful, rash decisions. They pray by soaring through the wind. You pray by kneeling by your bedside. That longing carries them back home into the nest to watch for signs of life. You feel her hold her breath. And finally, one morning, your phone rings, and by the doctor's tone of voice, you know, I'm sorry, none of them are viable. Next month, let's try again. Next month, next spring, as if they're infinite. You ask her why. She tells you there's no reason. This just happens sometimes. Soon, you'll find the strength to weep, but not right now. You turn on Eagle Cam. The bird is sitting on her clutch of eggs that she knows will never hatch. Your heart urges her to fly onto another season, but this one is pulling every feather of her being into grief. So the next poem I'm going to share, I guess, is technically a sonnet. So, kind of maybe echoing Elisa's, what Elisa has started. And so I was thinking of the word barren as a descriptor for infertile women that we don't use for infertile men, but whatever, right? That's just, I guess, the way it is. And how, maybe reimagining that term and reclaiming it somewhat. So this is technically a sonnet about that. So lots of repetition here. So it's titled Barren. No one's ever dared to call me barren, at least not to my face. But I call myself a barren swath of desert jeweled in sunset. Barren meaning dazzling wasteland, fallow, barren. Our clinic is an enclave for the barren, and we claim this space as ours. The barren are empty of all but strength. We may be barren, but we're lush with empathy. We barren team fiercely for a world that calls us barren. We stab ourselves with needles, barren of frailty, hearts like wells of hope. We're barren, but we try to bring the rain. And I'm barren but alive. I'm one of countless, barren, tough as dirt, fecund with faith and barren. This next one is the crows. So outside of my fertility clinic, for some reason, there were always crows and, cawing, and especially in the mornings, and most appointments are very early in the morning. And so I would see them, and, crows kind of mean bad luck. And so it was always kind of in the back of my mind that I wish they would go away. But, they're also beautiful and a part of the urban landscape. So the crows. It's easier to blame this on the crows. I see them as I walk into the clinic, perching on the roof or in the trees that dot the parking lot. Today, they're cawing goosebumps my flesh. I know bad news is coming. Does it follow them or follow me? My hurry sends them back into the sky. They carry blame up through the clouds like bits of garbage from this city, and I feel the weight of everything arising from my body as one glides into a thermal and another follows. Suddenly, their feathers paint a strip of Dallas sky, the color that I keep within my guts. The doctor reads me my results and says how I must have bad luck. It should have worked this time. It didn't, and it never does. I ask her why. She shakes her head and frowns. There's just some things that science can't explain. The crows outside the window keep on cooing as morning slips into its robe of light. I blame them, each and every one, for this, how swiftly they can make doubt disappear from the fragile edges of my psyche. It's just an omen, some old superstition, rather than the failings of this flesh, rather than a punishment from God. This next one is called Brown December. So during the pandemic, I spent a lot of time in Omaha, Nebraska, and I missed Texas dearly, and Texas's lush greenness and its warm winters. And so this is a poem about that, and also about infertility. So the Brown December. The snow is late to come in Omaha. It's December and the landscape still looks flat and barren, mile after mile of exhausted fields and faded tall grass. The gray sky hangs above. There should be snow. It's that time of the month, but nothing falls. There should be icicles alight like eyes in wonderment. This vista should be curved with snowdrifts round like bellies. Clouds should sag heavy with snow, the forecasters expecting, school children praying for it. You can't help but wonder if the earth is finished giving snowflakes. If the dawns of miracles, when you awake, look out your window, see your whole world suddenly transformed, now pure and glimmering with promise, the sound of children's laughter as they sled, build snowmen, make boot prints in the blanketing of snow, are over. Why bring snowflakes into this world of flare stacks and despair, of melting, warming, and exhaust? You've squandered snow days, cursing the pesky stains of snowmelt on the floor, the ache of cold, its kiss on your flushed cheeks. And now you're gazing at the graying sky, yearning for a blizzard, one last chance to spread your legs and arms and make an angel in your image, to feel that flurry deep within your flesh before your season ends. And I'm gonna do one more. So I'm from the Rio Grande Valley, and this is a poem about the freeze. I'm sure we all remember the freeze in February of 2021. And I wasn't in the valley at the time of the freeze, but I came back shortly after in early March, and I was struck by how, the flora of the valley just reacted to it. And there was so much, brown and dead trees, and really struck by the grapefruit groves and how they, just a lot of grapefruit and citrus trees died during that freeze. because it was unseasonably cold to say the least. So this is the grapefruit trees, February 2021, Rio Grande Valley. And this is written from the perspective of a tree, so please bear with me here. I feel the phantom heaviness of her tugging at my branches, though it's been weeks since she and all her sisters fell. The memory is frost blurred in my roots, the shock of polar wind between my leaves, the crystallizing ice, the branches ache, the loosening, the letting go, the sudden thump, the weightlessness that followed. How can I go on? Impossible. I sit with this, the scent of so much loss, lingering through March as rinds and fruit become a heap of humus at my roots. This should be the season of their growing, round like bellies, swelling ruby red, peels becoming golden in the summer, each fruit a universe of seeds and tartness, all fallen to the frozen ground this season at the hands of February's freeze. And there are groves of us, of grapefruit trees, weeping in silence in the aftermath, brittle and brown, refusing spring's amends. This fall will offer nothing for the harvest. The Gulf breeze urges me to rise again from this bed, to bathe in morning sunlight, dress in emerald leaves, and spritz myself with the dulcet scent of citrus blossoms. But how can I do that, God, to try again, with such a weight still heavy in my heartblood? Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Katie. That was amazing. It was a freeze too. I was in Texas. I think most of us were in Texas when that happened. So that was quite a shock, but thank you. Our next reader is Laura Cesarco Eglin, and she's a poet and a literary translator from Uruguay. Her latest poetry collection is a chapbook Between Gone and Leaving Home from Dancing Girl Press, and that was just released this year. And her latest translation is Klaus and the Scorpion by Galician author Laura de Paso Ruibal from Common Press 2022. And I don't know if I pronounced that correctly. Laura, you can correct me on that one. Longlisted for the 2023 PEN Award for Poetry in Translation. Lau is the publisher of Elise Books and teaches creative writing at the University of Houston downtown. Laura, thank you for being here and sharing your wonderful work with us.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Edward. Thank you, Maria and Elisa, for putting this panel together, and also very happy to be here sharing my work with all these lovely poets. So I'm going to read three poems from, I'm going to start by reading three poems from this new chapbook that is going to be coming out in May, so next month. It's called Between Gone and Leaving Home, and it's for a person that is multilingual and multicultural and that has lived in many places, I've had to redefine and adapt what the notion of home is for me. So the home is the body and the bodies of languages that I inhabit. Learning to live. Of all that which I forgot and forget and has forgotten me in return, what hurts the most is how to feel and recognize when I am actually feeling. Somewhere, it's still tangled like seaweed conjures itself up, plural, every time it's algae. It's easy when I see the red and feel the wet gush out of my sliced thumb, just a bit, just enough to show me it hurts, and I press my thumb hard because streaming is so close to too much and too soon. But feelings aren't instant. They take so long to be, and sometimes it's over 24 hours, one day and its stream, to know that something is flowing out inside, and by then it's too thick and wild, flooding is inevitable. It's difficult to be ready, to know what to do, to not have time to articulate into the right words that I know are drowning and drown any return of what just happened, what might continue to come out alive. I keep thinking about different experiences and how different they are when I'm living in different languages, living these experiences in different languages. So I was thinking of love, right? And how in English it's pronounced love, right? And in other languages it's different. A voiced labiodental fricative for love. That's the V in love. Say the word just right, where the teeth in all tenderness sink slowly into the inner side of the lower lip and hold, while vibration moves rooted statements from their beds. Mornings are the beginning most clear for you to leave your mouth slightly open, just as you practice sliding your teeth from their landing place with the end of a word on the tip of silence, brimming until it bursts your tongue. And the last poem from that chapbook, Between Gone and Leaving Home, is this one, Unfinished Business. I was born without nails, unfinished, very different from forever. No nails to cling to or claw at something, my life. Funny how I have to fight for what is already mine, hold on fast because it quickly becomes someone else's. Slowly, I nail the photo of you to the wall. Trying to hold on does not always look the same. It happens regardless of how tight or how loose, regardless of the speed. Maybe I bite my nails to restart, or because my teeth need sharpening. These next two poems are from this chapbook, Life One Not Attached to Conditionals. And in this chapbook, I was focusing on, it came out with 30 West Publishing House in 2020. And in this chapbook, I was focusing on and working through the experience of having melanoma and other kinds of skin cancer repeatedly. Melanoma's lines. I'm afraid to touch the new scar in case it deepens or hurts me as much as cancer did. I practice getting closer. The art of trying becomes training, and I become persistent or brave, and you call it stubborn. But I know how to listen to what's not ready, too raw for open to be welcoming. I was opened with a knife and felt blood run over my chest, run over. The feeling of emotional exhaustion as a side effect of too much. I smelled myself being burned, cauterized, they said, as if I didn't know how to detect euphemisms. One scar, then another, that's 2 lines already, a couplet written in 5 months, a couplet that promises to be the beginning of a lifetime of poetry. This other poem is also from that chapbook, Melanoma, The Politics of My Skin. One moment of quiet and I'll be able to think about stitches without my skin crawling out from under me, away like leather on my body, as if it were not itself a body that feels and is so vocal. I have not learned that language enough to call myself a native speaker. I haven't lived there all my life. There is still a part. And what is my life but this here? Skin, mine, having its revolution, demanding a seat at the table and talking as equals, as different and part, as necessary, as alive. This next poem is from this chapbook that came out in 2022 from Press 254, and it's called Time Tempo, the Idea of Breath. And I was looking into and exploring time as a social cultural construct. And in this particular poem, I'm looking at how the body participates in this. Days residues. The house is empty except for July 8th. Not sure what year. The dream didn't hold that as relevant. The day started at 4 a.m., even if at 7 a.m., I didn't know it yet. Much later, I try to go back to those first 3 hours. Let my tongue rest instead of pushing my teeth. Let my teeth bite into that emptiness. 4 a.m.'s texture is similar to the pages of the book I was holding while scanning them. It's just as well that my fingers are there now on every one of the 65 pages, holding as an act of love, even on July 8th, together with July 8th of that year, of every year, empty is no longer. And speaking of time and growing old, which is something that it seems to be, especially in women's body, we have to resist all these ideas of what is allowed for us, right? And in this prose poem, I am using two phrases from Maureen Thorson's book, Applies to Oranges. I'll indicate them by finger quoting. Growing old as welcome. The wrinkles of the ocean move like those on your face because they're real. You are you and the years it took to get here, knowing that the horizon curdles. But if instead it's oranges that you look like, we wouldn't be talking about lines. We'd talk about the places where the poem nests. All this to say that you and the ocean and oranges are necessary to keep the horizon from being a dead straight line. So these next few poems are not in any of my chapbooks or books. Some of them are in magazines and others are not, but in all of them, it's about falling and spraining ankles and breaking bones, which is like a lifelong career that started when I was 2. Apparently, I'm quite a bit of a klutz. Of bones and other aspirations. When I fell from that swing, I was only 2. I don't remember what my parents' faces looked like from the ground. What way was I facing when my collarbone cracked? Clavicule, that's the word I prefer for that break, the first break. It told me bones are not enough to shield me from falling apart. And yet, I don't know how close one gets to earth and earth, the distinction a capital letter makes, as if we can ever break from confusion, as if ambiguity is not mixed in all the time, as if I remember which part of the clavicule broke, as if there had been 2 from the start. Sometimes I practice body memory, letting it tell me which arm I had to hold close to my chest and pretend at immobility, pretend that I remember, pretend that I feel, pretend that a capital letter can make all the difference in this world, pretend that saying clavicule will make the experience more authentic because I cried in Spanish, pretend I was fluent at 2, pretend I can break away from anything, pretend I will not break apart, pretend 2 is more than 1, pretend. So I'm gonna skip because I think I'm running out of time. So I'm gonna go to the necessary gravity. Ice is slippery and gravity takes us from vertical and moving to falling horizontal and still. When back up, I remember to breathe my way back home, carrying bones and muscles that ask for attention. My pace is slower, but still going until hours later, I know there's something I forgot. Cry to mark an ending. And I'm going to finish with this last poem, and I hope it takes us back to the beginning where I was talking about the body and language. So my body as home, a multilingual home, a home that is far away from home, always close, always at a distance. Attempts at measuring. Sometimes I'm not sure I feel cold until I see my fingernails turned blue. And this is no embellishment of words or the tips of my fingers. 10 reasons to turn to my nails for information they give in degrees. The degrees of separation between the body and my body. To name my own as part, to not separate into pieces, parting. Sometimes we don't recognize constellations as such. Between 30 and 35 degrees south and 53 and 58 on the meridians. Yet it's so hard to know what is between here and there and how cold that makes me. This can't be measured in degrees. It's more about being disconnected. Perceptions, degrees coexist as contradictions, parallels, tendencies, arrays, similitudes, etudes, studies. An obtuse angle is wide and open in degrees that are also saying how out of reach understanding can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. That was very lovely, and hopefully we can discuss a little bit more of the poetry after Carolina, our last reader, reads her wonderful poetry. And this is just want to introduce Carolina Monsivaís. She is a poet and historian currently living in the Rio Grande Valley. She is the author of Descend from Mouthfeel Press, published in 2016. And she is a co-founding member of Poets Against Walls. She is originally from El Paso, which is where I met Carolina. So glad to have you here, Carolina.
Hi, thank you again for including me. I'm really happy to be here. Good afternoon to everyone who's watching, and thank you for coming out to listen to some poetry. So I'm going to do a combination, I think, of things here, but mainly looking at some new work that I'm trying to make my way through a new manuscript. So I want to just start with a poem that sort of sets up, I guess, the way my thinking works. And I think it was Katie who said sometimes we use these tools to try to make sense, right, of the world around us and the things that are happening. And so in this instance, it's thinking about trying to use my tools as a poet and a historian to try to make sense of things around us, and especially grief. So I'll start with one called A Letter to My Son. It was only the third time since you arrived into the world. The year hope, a dark blue and red emblem, seemed to mark a crossroad, that I felt my voice splinter. And my son, I had to hold your head close and breathe in your hair to evoke the desert, our home, our shared birthplace, our shared homeland, La Frontera, my comfort against the hate that grasped at an era of imagined redemption. I heed my mentor's warning. History does not repeat itself exactly. Even the similarities are the deliberate, calculated actions of men, replications. Their plans stirred fears held about our home, a space they think wide open to our people, interlopers always, and not the fence jutting or the heat or the river claiming and giving. We are here when blame needs placing. My son, your ether returned the year I was born, and the US seemed less a specter that deported your great aunt when she dared to say her children deserved a better school. I want you to know our continual presence, our rootedness, our belonging, our place in this land's history is a threat to an invented color line. The they who chanted and chanted for a wall want to clearly reestablish this line that even men, these men who always want something from us, our land, our labor, even our absence, promised. You can count the 3 days you witnessed tears. The women who raised me taught me strength and arms wrapped tight to close away vulnerabilities that I resented, but understand now as a necessity to believe that I can keep you safe. A feeling that you, my son, equate with our home's mountains that limits every storm's reach, that I echo in my embrace so you may feel it wherever we go, so we may carry home everywhere. Our home, where a man who rules in favor of divisions will declare our home, our history, a sliver and force it into the image of his rhetoric, a war zone that isn't, except in necessity. I remember also that on that day, I saw a young man on campus clad in bright red and blue, covered in the slogan of what will be made great again, gleefully, as if some match had just been won. And my son, I wanted to hug him, this boy, someone else's son, against what he doesn't know is coming. From those who chanted wall, 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 from those who whispered it wistfully to themselves. so their one friend of color wouldn't judge them openly from those who recognize the slogan's danger. But my son, they voted for an imagined past anyway, because like a beast diseased and eating its own tentacles, they would rather destroy themselves than finally accept us. So just to kind of, and that kind of sets up a little bit of how I approach, trying to make sense of difficult subjects. And so I noticed as I was making my way through my new manuscript, and those who have heard me talk about this know that it's about my brother's passing. I guess it's almost going on 7 years now. And I noticed that when I was writing some early poems, I kept using images of water and drowning and things like that. And so I actually went back to an original poem to pull the working title of it. And it actually comes from my first collection, somewhere between Houston and El Paso. So I'm just going to read a portion of it. And then I'll move on to some of the newer works. But this one is called What I Remember About Almost Drowning in a Lake Somewhere in Kentucky. My brother sitting on a boulder near the middle of the lake when I followed him without realizing the unevenness of the bottom. I drifted down into the water, looking up, wondering what happened. When hands pulled me out, the air poured over my face. My father breathed it into my mouth, pushing the water from my body. He turned my head, and I could see my mother's clothes wrapped wet around her swelling abdomen. My mother still reassures me that my brother did climb down from that boulder to see how I was. I have no memory of that moment, nor of any other where his voice should have broken through moments submerged in stillness. And so the title I'm working with right now is Now You've Gone Where I Can't Follow. So there's different poems that kind of play with this idea. And approaching it as a historian, I think about how to document, some of what has happened, how to make sense of things, but also in how to shape grief is thinking about all these different moments now that I also grieve at the same time as I'm dealing with this loss. So this one is called A Document. Jose Hernandez was once deported for harboring alcohol for a tequilero. You thought I was going to write drugs, my brother, but no, just a few bottles of mezcal and tequila. We never much thought about how even lined up tequila shots have their own history, as they inspire cuentos, like the ones we were supposed to keep sharing, while complaining about the heft of aging. But now I am older than you ever were, and you left me to face whatever's next on my own. The historian scoffs because Jose Hernandez was deported while Al Capone was famous and will never have a movie of his life made. And what is aging, anyway, to a historian who finds yellow documents stained with half circles left by rusted paper clips? Jose Hernandez was deported again when he tried to return to his wife and children. And laws passed in 1929 meant a deportation could lead to another deportation and another deportation if one did not have a document to prove on which side they were born. Jose Hernandez was a farmer, and I can tell you this because the Border Patrol agent who caught him asked him for his occupation. I can only imagine he concealed contraband because he wanted to escape the grip of Anglo's plantation dreams. Not all fantasies ever fade in this country, my brother. And one day, another historian might stumble on the documents you left that were taken from us, your family, and write the letter of the why that we were never allowed to witness. My myth. Her spine twisted hell broke from my body. My hand hovered over my chest and ridges rose. A river cut through and gave her ground to wander, because every Chicana needs space for her own Llorona. On one side, the father hushes her howls. On the other, her mother whispers, unleash. She releases and breaks everyone in the room. That is my myth. She undoes every part of myself and makes me spend every year getting to know the person grief made of me. So, and the other thing I'm doing with this is also playing with the epistolary form. So keep writing letters, and so they're sometimes just numbered. So this one is just letter number 2 to my brother. Dear brother, mi hermano. I try not to think of myself years ago there, collapsed on a hotel floor, when my back finally splintered. A dark pain sucked every breath and pierced every moment. Walking became a matter of will. My son's cries that day, a pearled guilt that guts my memory and chokes me still. Every pill I counted after, like the ones you hid. I considered keeping all of myself from waking because I felt an inconvenience to love and be loved. And I loathed the face a husband saved only for me. It was the patriarchy that kept me alive. Can you believe that? Because I would be damned if anyone else were to raise my son. I do not like to write this because it would be deemed too sentimental. Neither the poet nor the historian wants to hear that accusation. But my brother, when I saw my son's cocooned heartbeat pulsing on the screen, I knew he was my destiny, and I was his. Until you find a tether to live broken, this can be just enough. And maybe I should have told you this. Okay, and I'll leave you with what icons remained. This hija struts her curved gait down sheared, shrubbed paths and brushes shadows of brown shoulders as their arms clear these paths, flattened against sky, making her unsure of distance, time, or place. She holds the past and present in each hand and carries dust within her home. One foot drags exhausted, her hair tangled with desert sticker burrs. Tiny spikes poke through. She's trying to survive the years that tried to bury her. Her hands blur wind because one calendar's elements granted her this. She understands, finally, as Chicanas did before, to keep moving, reaching, creating, fighting, because we feel not fully within any nation. And every language becomes about survival. And we cannot help how some men choose to remember or how others make their own nations. Thank you.
Wow, Carolina, that was a powerful, powerful ending. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. I am truly just very happy to be here amongst you all, and I want to thank you all for inviting me to be part of the panel to help moderate this. I have to thank Elisa Garza for putting it together. And so many of us in this panel, you know, we, like I mentioned, I think in the very beginning, our writing is about the body, about things that we are currently undergoing, and maybe survived and are surviving. And so I do think that poetry is extremely powerful when it comes to talking about these illnesses and things that happen to us in our lives and to others, and how we approach them is important to reach our audiences, our readers, to help resonate, to help our readers resonate with what we write. And sometimes, we shy away from talking about disabilities, talking about our illnesses. We don't want anyone to know. And yet so many of us, and we feel alone at times, because we feel like we are the only ones that are going through this, even though we know that there's other people who are out there. And so poetry allows us to have that bridge, to reach others and to bring them into our space and to have these discussions. So what I want to do today is for the next few minutes, I want to open it up to discussion, to questions. I as you all know, I prepared some questions too, but I want you to pitch in. I want you to, I sort of wanted this to be more of an organic conversation now that we have heard your poetry. So I do have couple of questions on craft, but I also have more specific questions on for each one of you. And if you're welcome to respond to them, or if you're, or I will need help with this. I will definitely need help with this. So why don't we start with the matter of craft? Because I think it's important, right, as poets. And I know that all of you approach writing about the body from different perspectives, different poetics, and to write about the illness, grief, displacement, disability, and to reclaim to reclaim your bodies and empower you. And so we make choices when we write. Of course, language is the art of poetry. It's the heart. So what choices, when you start to write about the body, and so what choices do you make when writing poems that will help connect your experience with your readers or enrich their struggles or what they're going through or have already survived? Yes.
Maria, I just wanted to make a comment and answer some of that. So for me, so I live with an autoimmune disease that affects my eyes and my walking, my ability to speak. And so I have a lot of physical limitations. And how I approach craft is often through visual language. I am a visual artist. So in my notebook, when I'm resting in bed, I get sick a lot. A lot of my poems are created while I'm sick in bed. So I start with visual language, and I start with images that come to me from the illustrations that I put together. And from that, I start crafting poems. They're often, when I write them down, they're raw documentation of what I'm experiencing. And then when I go to the page, I start crafting poems, trying to find ways to connect with the reader. I don't think that you need to have the same experiences to connect or feel impacted by someone's experience. But I think everyone can relate to that idea of having limitations of some kind and finding a way to do the things that you want to do with what you have.
Definitely, Leslie, I completely agree with you. And I have seen your artwork. You have so graciously shared it with me before, and it is beautiful. And I know you had mentioned in the past, I wish we would have brought it here too, but that is amazing. I think I do want to return to what you said, but I think Lau, did you have something to add, Laura? Or was I?
No, I can add. No, for me, I can't separate the language and writing poetry from the way I live my life. So I can't separate also language or the languages that I live in, right? So when I'm writing, I'm inhabiting those bodies and I'm inhabiting my, this physical body, but language also as a physicality. But also, living in the body of language, but also writing poetry as thinking and thinking through and I participate in the world through my body, but also through my writing. So again, everything for me is interconnected.
Okay, Elisa.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to this idea that several of us have mentioned is this kind of using writing as a means to understanding what's happening and trying to make sense of, in my case, illness or lots of other things that I also write about too. But it's the writing is like a thought process in a lot of ways. You start out with something really rough, like Leslie mentioned, in your journal, and then or an idea, and you think about it, and you try to understand it. And in some ways, you're also doing lots of other things. You're not just trying to understand. Sometimes you're trying to control it or direct it or correct it or find a way to make it improve it. There are lots of different ways to go about that. But for me, that's kind of how I process the world, right? I'm thinking about it and trying to understand and seek and find a way to manage all of the complexity that is, and when you think about illness that is, entirely outside of your control, there's a lot to seek to understand and try to manage and deal with all of that complexity. And so that's where a lot of it comes from for me.
Do you think, on the subject of understanding, do you think it's possible through poetry to reach or to understand illness externally? When you write it, I mean, I know you mentioned we explore it, we investigate it. Do you think it's really possible, or is this like an ongoing, investigation? I mean, what do you think about that? Like, is it possible to understand illness? And even for our readers, can we reach that understanding? Anyone can answer, by the way. Lau?
No, Katie, go ahead.
Oh, Katie. Yes, I'm sorry. Let me get my view, my full screen gallery view here so I can see everyone. Yes.
Yeah, I didn't even raise my hand, but I was going to unmute. I don't think you can ever completely understand, but I do think that poetry is a really powerful tool in our toolbox to build empathy for our one another's experiences. Like we get a glimpse within maybe 14 lines of what that experience feels like. And for that brief moment, we can further our understanding. But no, I don't think we ever would completely understand. But I think it's just an important tool that we have, just like all other art forms, like, visual arts or even music can help us to really describe the ineffable experiences of being our unique selves.
I have all my faith in poetry. So I do think that it can, when we're reading these poems and we're writing these poems, we're putting all our body and everything there, right? Whatever it is that we're talking about, it's there. And when the reader reads it, they are participating, right? Because language is not just a thing on the page. They're inhabiting this language. And yes, like you're saying, Katie, you learn to feel what others feel. You open up to different possibilities of how to perceive the world or different experiences that you might not have. You definitely learn a lot. I think, yeah, I mean, yeah. poetry is the best.
Yes, I totally agree with you, Laura. You know, on my not very good days, I always take my pen and try to make sense of what I'm going through, you know. And also when we decide that we are, I mean, again, I'm going to ask a question about craft, and, you know, knowing that when we deal with illness, displacement, grief, and disability, I mean, certain emotions are very collective, right? I mean, for like frustration, hopes, anger, longing, and this sometimes can be very overwhelming. I mean, they are overwhelming in our lives, and when we write poetry, you know, sometimes we take those emotions into our paper. But how do we? So, like, what kind of strategies do you use when writing to help clear the way of you know, being overpowered by the negativity of this emotions in poetry, and make it more profound and universal? I mean, is there such a thing? First of all, I guess. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was someone raising their hand? I'm sorry,
No.
Eliza. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Leslie. I'll go after you.
I was going to say that poetry for me is a way to remain curious, even if my body is not able to do very much. I feel intellectually enlivened, invigorated by thinking through, you know, all the issues that I'm faced with, and in documenting experience. And I think that for readers, if we are truthful on the page, that we can't necessarily elicit empathy, because empathy is a hard thing to make others feel, but we can elicit at least curiosity as well. The reader has to fulfill their part of connecting, but for me, it's understanding the whole multitude of feelings and complicated intellectual ways of understanding, and not to get stuck on one way of looking at an experience.
Yeah, I definitely agree that curiosity is an important part of the reader experience. It's what gets them to pick up the book or look at the poem to begin with. And that one of the things that I do to really kind of control the emotion is I look at form. For me, form is the best way to contain that rawness and that particularity, the emotion that's particular to me, and to kind of refine it in a way that's more understandable and reachable by the readers. And so, like I mentioned today, everything I read today was a sonnet, which is the form I have been exploring over the last several months with these topics. But I've also spent time within the last 6 to 8 months creating poems that are creating forms for my poems. I became really interested in forms that can be read multiple ways. So forms that have columns where you can read them across like a traditional poem, or you can read them up and down and then go to the next column. And so that they say something regardless of which way you go. And or poems that are like side by side where you can flip back and forth, or you can go like this or like that. And for me, focusing on the form and fitting the emotion into the form is a way to make it less so much about me and more about the reader being able to maintain that curiosity or identification with it.
I haven't really, I guess it's a good time for me to jump in a little bit. I was going to comment on both of those, especially Leslie's comment about curiosity. I think that's probably the number one thing that drives me, is this idea of curiosity and creation. I feel like this approach to this manuscript is completely different from anything I've really ever done before. And it's probably because most of my days are spent in front of a classroom discussing, these large historical events. And I feel like I have to have a certain strict persona, right? That's Dr. Monsivaís over there. And then when I'm by myself, I feel like that's when I get to be vulnerable. But I also have to have a balance. And I've been trying to really pare down and shape things very carefully. Not because I don't want to appear vulnerable, but maybe not overwhelm either. And so the other part is, I think what Leslie was saying is really important, is that I used to approach poems and think I know exactly where I'm going to go with this poem, right? But now I tell myself, you can't know, you don't even know what you're trying to tell yourself. Yeah, you just write until you figure out what it is you're trying to say to yourself. And in that moment of realization or whatever it is, I think that's where you find that connection to your reader, I think, because if you're not surprised, right, if you haven't realized something in this, then your reader probably won't either. So that's kind of how I've been approaching that.
Yeah, very excellent points. Excellent points. If the audience out there has any questions, I would love to, if you can just type them up in the chat, and maybe we can get them. I know that there's a small lapse, right, of time when between the production, but that would be really good too. We don't have much time left, so I like to see if we can get some questions from the audience, but also I found this quote from Polly Atkin, and it kind of struck to me because all of you write from different perspectives. I mean, Katie, Elisa, you explore nature. Leslie, you explore the underworld. Carolina, you explore you explore grief, but you also explore history and how that affects the body, and Lau, you explore, you explore the time and aging. And so you all come from different directions. And I love that about your poetry. And so I'm going to read this, and perhaps Elisa and Katie can elaborate a little bit more. And this is from Polly Atkin. Everything we experience of the world, we experience in and through and with our bodies. Our relationship with our body informs our relationship with the world. For some people, this is easier to forget than others. And when I read this, she is mostly writing, when she wrote this, she was mostly writing about nature and the connection we have, with our bodies have with nature. So there was a very specific questions that I had, and then maybe you can help me out with this. What is the connection between nature and the body? And can you elaborate on the themes and how the destruction of natural resources and even glorifying capitalism impacts women and their bodies, and just women in general?
Well, I mean, we are a part of nature, and everything that we do, even in nature's destruction, is, I mean, I think of like this, we tend to think of ourselves as being separated from nature, but we're really not, right? We're animals just like the squirrels outside and the birds in the sky. So that's one thing that really kind of strikes me, that I think about, and like how it relates to the struggles of women. Well, when we separate nature from civilization, we, just like when we separate the masculine from the feminine, one of the two ends up being disparaged, right? And so with gender, the feminine is disparaged and the masculine is celebrated. The same thing with our relationship with nature. We privilege, the civilization at the expense of the natural landscape. And of course, we do that because, we use the land to create profits and to create, in the pursuit of capitalistic gains, right? So, so that's I think how I would answer your question, Maria.
Well, and I think to kind of continue where Katie left off, it's like in the pursuit of capitalism and the use of nature has been poisoned, you know, in so many ways. And so one of the other things I write about a lot is the bayou, where I take a walk every single day. And that walk is important to centering me as a human being, because I get to see the birds and the plants and all the other things that are happening there that are part of nature, but also as someone with an illness that impacts my body every single day, I need that interaction in order to function psychologically well. You know, it's like a calming force. But one of the other things that I also write about a lot is about all the trash that shows up in the bayou. I have these 5 or 6 poems that I've written about that from different kinds of angles. And for me, not something that I've written about yet, but that is always on my mind, is that this destruction of nature and the pollution of nature is probably a huge contributing factor to my illness, right? That, as Katie said, we are a part of nature. We are animals that are a part of it. And when we pollute our environment, it affects us in so many ways. And so while I don't have exact information about that, there's always that connection for me between the ways that for generations and generations we've polluted the environment. And now so many of us are sick, you know, and our bodies are failing us because we've lost that connection and we've polluted what's left of it.
So we only have a couple of minutes, but I want to ask these questions now that we're in the topic of Earth, and I just want to ask aloud. Like, I noticed that some of your poetry has this recurring theme about the Earth and the body touching the Earth. Can you just elaborate on that particular theme of the body and the Earth? And you know, and I know that also that a lot of your knowledge is of languages and mobility has informed your poetry. Just give us a little synopsis of that.
So I think it's a multi-pronged, but so yeah, I mean, the connection with the Earth, not just nature, but also the Earth, the planet. In part, it's because I fall a lot, this gravity that is pulling us, keeping us grounded, right? So again, everything is, for me in my life, and I see everything as multi faceted, but also it also has to do with distance and finding a home and be in what place and being here and my family being there, and I'm from over there and I'm speaking in this language, but they don't understand me and my accent and this and moving and again, so this feeling grounded but not feeling grounded, this falling down and trying to be upright, and the language of nature, my own language, the body as language. So I think it's all connected. I'm trying to answer quickly so that we have time for somebody else to chip in.
Does anyone else have any comments in reference to that, or would like to pitch in or ask a question? So, you know, it is 2:30 and I don't want to keep everyone, you know, more than we have to. I did have some more questions prepared, but I would love to maybe in another occasion, you know, create more space and have more time to answer or to go over some of the questions and put, you know, just kind of bring all this together. I want to thank, I do want to thank Edward and everyone who participated today and all the audience out there. We really appreciate this being here, and gracias, Edward, for creating space. Gracias to Elisa for bringing us together, and to all the poets who participated here today. Hermanas for life.
Gracias, Maria, and thank you all, the authors that, shared their stories and their poetry and their, pain and their healing, and just it's so inspiring. Thank you so much, Elisa, for your poetry, for being a big part of this as well. Katie Hoerth, thank you. Congratulations. Say hello to Bruno for me. Miss you. Haven't seen you in a long time. Carolina, it was great seeing you the other night at the college and university poetry reading. Leslie, always a pleasure. Love you very much. Always have you in my, light energy and prayers for healing. And Maria, thank you for Mouthfeel Press, for everything that you do for our Latinx women and for small press publishing out there. You're much needed. You're a wonderful voice. And thank you again for everyone that was watching and contributed and gave comments on the Rio Grande Valley International Poetry Facebook page. We hope that we can do this sometime again in the year leading up to our next festival, and maybe seeing some of you in person. So on behalf of VIPF, I want to thank you. Wish you all a wonderful Sunday. Wish you all health and healing. And until next time, take care.